Now we begin with new details and a lack of answers following the discovery of cocaine at the White House. Federal officials are now reportedly running DNA and fingerprint tests on the small bag of cocaine, all in an effort to potentially track down the culprit. The White House says the bag of cocaine was found in a heavily traveled area of the West Wing, while the Secret Service tells Fox News that the drug was located in a cubby used by staffers and guests. And while the investigation has been underway for just 4 days, one law enforcement official familiar with the situation is already telling Politico that it is, quote, highly unlikely that a culprit will be found. Really? Meanwhile, President Biden wasn't at the White House when the bag was discovered, but he's still keeping quiet on the whole situation. And White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre faced a barrage of questions about the cocaine discovery, to which she answered none of them.
So what's preventing a visitor from bringing in anthrax or something that's not magnetic into the White House?
No, look, Weijia, I totally understand the question, but it is under investigation.
Does the White House support the prosecution of this individual?
I'm just not going to get into hypotheticals from here.
Would the president be satisfied with, sir, this is a busy room and we found some cocaine. We don't know who brought it.
So let's see what the Secret Service says, right?
How determined is the president to get to the bottom of who brought illegal drugs into the White House?
The president thinks it's very important to get to the bottom of this.
Kaylee, the only thing to me more patently unacceptable than finding drugs in the White House would be the press secretary's absolute refusal to address even one question about it. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
She brought nothing. I would not have walked to that podium without saying, Secret Service, you have to give me something here. I mean, you read the headline from Politico. Daniel Lippman, the reporter there, got more than the press secretary of the White House. She said she did have some information to add, and it was this: the president and the first lady and their family were not here this weekend. That's not new information. Okay, we've known that. All you have to do is read pool reports or reporting about where the president is over 4th of July weekend. She brought no answers, totally inexcusable. And just to break this down for our viewers, this entrance, it's the basement of West Executive. So this is the road that runs between where most of the White House staff works and the West Wing. It is heavily trafficked. That is true. Press does not go through this door, so that rules out the press. There's a Secret Service agent sitting at the desk right in that door at all times. So this would have had to have been left in front of a Secret Service agent. They rotate. I imagine they would have found this pretty quickly because you have someone staring at the entrance and looking around the room at all times. It's so heavily trafficked that guests come through. My mom's been through there, my sister, my dad, baby Blake, though she didn't bring cocaine in there. Someone did. Not my daughter.
Thanks for clarifying.
But the scariest part, just last point, is the President of the United States walks through this entrance. If the motorcade is on West Exec, which it often is, I've seen President Trump walk through there, and the thought that President Biden could have been within feet of a powdery substance that was unknown. It's incomprehensible and it is inexcusable.
That's right. And Ben, you know, to that point of Kaylee's, I find it difficult to believe, in fact, downright unbelievable, that if it was in a cubby associated with other things, I'm sure it wasn't just by itself Indiana Jones style on top of the pedestal.
Yeah.
So is there no way to ascertain the identity with them saying it's likely unable to be found? I'm sorry. I thought we were supposed to have the highest faith in the law enforcement surrounding the President of the United States. So why
There's
won't
no
we be
way
able
in
to
hell
learn?
they don't know who this is. And this goes back to the same BS that we heard when we had the leak out of the Supreme Court. We can't find them. Like, if our government can't figure out who walked in with cocaine into a White House, and when they say it's heavily traveled area, I've been there a lot. You've been there a ton. This is not Disney World. The definition of heavily trafficked area is still a very small number of people at the White House that would walk through this area. You just can't walk in there. You can't. This is not some like thousands and thousands of people in a corridor all day long. This is not a theme park. It's the White House. There are cameras everywhere.
The press usually has a camera on that entrance.
Correct. And my point is, if they can't figure it out, I guarantee you, and this is where I'm going to call BS on this, if this was a substance that could have been a threat to the president, we would find out who did it. So why is it different because it's cocaine now, unless they're wanting just to make sure that whoever brought it in isn't known to the public? Because I promise you, if this was anthrax or something else, we would find out who brought it in. There's enough cameras there. There's enough people watching. This is not an unsolved mystery. This is solved, I would assume, already, and now they're just trying to make it go away.
And Lisa, to Ben's point about, sheer volume here, my next door neighbor whose terrace abuts mine had a party while I was gone for the weekend. One of her guests flicked a cigarette onto my couch, burned a hole. It was a pretty big party, and she still figured out who it was. The whole point is, by law of averages,
Yeah. Send her to the White House.
The point is, if she can figure out in this big party who flicked the cigarette, I think you would think it would be possible for the White House to figure out via law enforcement which person who had legal access to that heavily traveled area, whose possession it was.
They know. They have to know. It's a cover-up. That's what it is. I mean, they have to. And who would have the gumption to bring cocaine to the White House unless you knew that you would get away with it? And who would probably get away with it? Probably the president's son, right, who has a history of drug abuse, so much so that he smoked Parmesan cheese because he thought it was crack. So I don't know. I mean, but who else would have the gumption to bring cocaine to the White House unless you knew without a shadow of doubt that you would get away with it? I mean, this is the most secure building, or one of the most secure buildings, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. There's cameras everywhere. There's an insane amount of security. Of course they know who it was.
But
I
we
would
do
say
have
the
to say,
the president's family was at Camp David from Friday to Tuesday. So I would say that. Hunter was there as well. So that's an alibi.
And we do have to, excuse me for a second, Ben, we do have to say we do not know yet who it is. There has been no evidence linking it with Hunter, and it's our understanding yet that the culprit has not been identified. So as it develops, we will see if you are proven right, but at this point, we do not know for certain. Cheryl, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I mentioned this, the security cameras. I mean, it is the White House. The president is there. The national security implications, that's what I think really, bothers me the most out of this, is that if you can't find out who this was, that brought cocaine to the White House, what if somebody else was a threat? It was inside of that building, inside of that walls. That's, I think, what concerns me the most about this whole story. And as far as Jean-Pierre yesterday, I mean, I don't know if it's a slow news week, but I mean, talk about getting peppered with questions, and she really had nothing, and I found that very disappointing. You would have thought she would have had at least some answers as to, or at least updates in the investigation, to your point,
Not even
Kaylee.
answering if you'd prosecute the person.
Right.
Well, and they're not going to.
If
it was someone random, they would tell us just to get it out of the way.
I don't know. I think they're so arrogant that they're just like, it's our White House. We can do whatever the hell we want to do. Because you should have walked out there. But you should have walked out there and said, we're going to find this person.
Yes.
It's a full investigation into this. And whoever did this will never step foot in the White House again. That's the official statement of the White House. There's no losing on that answer. I think it's just an arrogance factor. They're saying, we are accountable to no one. We can do whatever we want to do. The FBI can, the DOJ can. We can cover up anything we want to cover up. And guess what? We don't have to answer any of your questions because we're not the White House that was going to be transparent. We'll shut up. We'll laugh in your face. Well, as the president said, come on.
Well, President Trump, I guarantee you, he would have walked straight to that podium and said, I will prosecute whoever.
Bingo.
But what you just said underscores the point why it was there in the first place. Because nothing emanating from this White House says in any way that there is a hard line where things are unacceptable.
Yep.
The whole reason that a staffer, whoever it was, felt free, had the gumption to bring an illicit substance to the people's house was because they knew there wouldn't be any repercussion. They knew there wouldn't be accountability. That's Biden's America. It's Biden's White House. And it's unacceptable.
Also, not recommended to do that.
No.
Not yes. Word of the wise.
Exactly. They
go differently for you.
Unlike the president. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.